you know what, I need someone to help hold me accountable, create better accountability, and start becoming more proactive versus reactive to everything that was happening in my life and business.
This is the Staying Power Podcast, a show that explores the challenges business owners face as they grow. I'm Brandon Hall.
And I'm Thomas Castelli.
And together we ask the tough questions to show you that running a business is not for the faint of heart. But if you have staying power, you'll overcome your challenges and achieve lasting success.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Staying Power Podcast. Today, we're joined with Mitchell Simonson, Staying Power community member and founder of Simonson Appraisals, a virtual firm providing commercial real estate valuation services in Minnesota, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. In today's episode, we discuss the challenges Mitchell faces growing a virtual firm, including hiring and training new staff members, building a business around your lifestyle and personal boundaries, how coaching has helped him, and much more.
Hey, Mitch, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show today. Would you be able to give our listeners a little information on your background?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Mitchell Simonson. I'm the owner-founder of Simonson Appraisals. We're a commercial real estate appraisal company based out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Our coverage area is primarily Minnesota, North Dakota, and western Wisconsin. And our goal is to provide appraisal services primarily for banks on financing and refinancing acquisitions. And we work with real estate attorneys in the areas of property tax appeal, eminent domain, and estate planning. And we also provide consulting services directly for property owners. And I founded the firm in January of 2019. So we're about 19 months in, and we've grown to a size. We have currently 4 staff appraisers and then 2 admin people as well. So we're a team of 6 at the present time.
Why did you decide to start your own firm, and how do you know it was the right time to start it? Why January 2019?
So, I've had the dream of being a business owner for a very long time. It actually goes back to when I was in elementary school. I grew up in a very blue collar, smaller town. My dad was a truck driver, and he always encouraged us to chase our dreams. And there was one individual, it's a kind of a fun story. Every morning riding the bus, there was a businessman who had a white Cadillac, and I'd always see him walking into his office with a briefcase. It turns out he was an accountant. So you guys can kind of in your industry. But for whatever reason, that image always struck with me. And I thought, boy, this guy has it together. So fast forward, I entered college. I was the first in my family to graduate. I'm one of 11 in my family, and the 4th youngest. Had some great mentors along the way, but got into the real estate appraisal business. And then the first several years of my career, I was learning the industry, worked for a few different firms, and had a lot of great mentors, and kind of learning the business, becoming a professional and learning the craft of appraisal. And then from that point, feels like I've been marching on this journey to gaining the skills and the confidence to one day be able to start my own appraisal firm.
Very good. I just wanted to chime in and ask if you ever got like feeling like you had it all together, I feel like I'm the accountant, I guess, in that scenario, and just wondering if owning a business ever got you there. Because my experience owning the business is that I don't have it all together. Might try to appear that. But.
Sure. You like to give the appearance, but at times I would certainly agree that it can feel like a big hot mess. Right when you think you have things dialed in. And I've studied a lot of material from Darren Hardy, former, I think the publisher or editor of Success Magazine. And he was really instrumental just consuming his information. But he wrote the book, The Entrepreneurial Rollercoaster. And right when he talks about being at the top, where you're about, just like in a roller coaster, where you're feeling like you have things together and you're excited, and pretty soon you're heading straight down and you're careening off the rails. I mean, it definitely feels like that a lot, but also what I've come to learn is that's the excitement, that's the fun, that's what creates the excitement and I guess the opportunities that for you to correct and keep the train on the track, if that answers your question.
I think it certainly does. And, coming along Simonson's Appraisals, when you first started, did you start it by yourself? It was a solo effort, or did you start up with partners, like just, already like from the get?
So I got into the appraisal business in 2005, worked for really one firm as a national appraisal firm for 7 years. And then in 2012, I'd gotten my MEI designation, which I tell people unfamiliar with commercial real estate, it's kind of the equivalent of a CPA in accounting, kind of the gold standard for appraisal. So at that point, my goal was to continue my professional growth and start bringing in my own clients and working with them. And so an opportunity opened up with another local smaller firm to partner up with them. And so I became a partner in early 2013. And that continued through year end 2018. And kind of as my business has grown and my book of business and the clients I serve and whatnot, that led me to making a pivot in January of 2019 to starting Simonson Appraisals and starting my new firm, which when I started, it was a team of just two.
Guys, so when you started your firm, and we understand you're a virtual firm, you don't have an office. What challenges have you faced so far growing in a virtual environment?
I would say one of the challenges of growing a virtual firm has been training the newer staff that have come on board. One of the reasons I started a virtual firm is I do a lot of work in North Dakota, and there was a period of time where it seemed like I was traveling to North Dakota maybe once every 4 to 6 weeks and doing a lot of inspections out there. And it just so happened that my wife and I and our family would like to travel in our motorhome, and it just worked a couple of times where I would go do the inspections, and then it didn't matter really where I was working. As long as I had my computer and laptop, I had the flexibility to get my work done, and we could travel at the same time. And so that kind of opened my eyes up to the idea that, do I really need an office? And so then when I made the decision to start my new company as a virtual firm, this is all pre-COVID, of course. So it was interesting. I had two well-qualified staff appraisers that reached out to me when I made the switch or shortly thereafter. And it felt like it created an attractive opportunity for professionals who are well established, but not necessarily wanting to go into an office environment every day. So that I felt like proved to be at least in the short term in 2019, pre-COVID, a nice little recruiting advantage for my firm. But yeah, no, I would say this year we've brought on an intern. I had an intern through last summer as well, and I actually had them working remotely from my home, or not working remotely, but I was able to train them in person last year through my home. But now this year, that's one challenge that I need to overcome is figuring out a better way to onboard and train new staff members remotely. It definitely feels like a work in progress and haven't come up with the proper solution yet for it.
I mean, it's interesting for your company because virtual to you means that you don't have a physical office. Everybody does their work geographically dispersed, but you still have to physically visit the asset that you are appraising. So you've almost got like a hybrid virtual where 90% is virtual, but 10% is on the ground. And I can definitely see how that would be very difficult to figure out how to train people. I mean, how do you train people? How do you train these other appraisers, or do you even train the other appraisers? Do you just hire people that are already experienced and already know how to conduct their own appraisals?
Yeah, so up to this point, I currently have 3 staff appraisers, and one of them had been with me for 6 or 7 years when I made the switch in 2019 to starting my new company. And then the other 2 were both already been working as appraisers for 10 plus years. So they know the game of how to write an appraisal from cover to cover, and they do their own site inspections. The challenge, and again, that's the piece that I'm thinking about right now and trying to map out. In fact, in September, I'm setting up scheduling time to fully map that out. So if we are ready to onboard another, say, trainee appraiser, it requires that back and forth interaction is so vital. I don't have a clear answer for that yet. I guess what I think about is creating some training videos for one, but then there's still a lot of, back and forth interaction to create that knowledge base for the person coming in.
I can relate to that. One of the books I read or started to read, Conversational Intelligence, started reading it a while back. It talks about how certain people learn or certain learning styles is a dialogue back and forth, and it just escalates, and that's how people learn. And so some of that, while video training could definitely be a help, some of it does require one-on-one training or group training that's alive with people where you can have that dialogue back and forth. So definitely see that there, which could be a challenge if you're trying to train in a group environment, but I think it could definitely be done virtually for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I know I'm not alone. I'm in the commercial real estate space, so I've been tracking kind of national trends as well. As there's a lot of national companies in the current COVID environment that have moved to a full-time remote work environment as well. And that's one of the trends that I'm seeing is that from a productivity standpoint, the senior staff, the people that already have the skills and they know what to do, their productivity has been fine, but trying to onboard new employees or junior members is the biggest challenge. So maybe there's an opportunity out there for someone to, creating that training ground to bridge the gap.
And I mean, educational materials or I guess even online education programs can be highly lucrative. So what's held you back from trying to figure that piece out?
I would say it's probably my biggest challenge that maybe we'll dive into a little more, but it's being overcommitted, as a small business and still putting a lot of energy into getting the business off the ground and to a place where I feel like it can maybe have a little more time for opportunities such as that. But it's, I still write appraisals and then sign my own appraisals. And then in addition to that, I do a lot with the marketing. So it's still trying to maybe weed out some of the hats that I wear. So that's really, I would say, my overcommitment, because I do have a passion for teaching and sharing information, but carving out the time to make it happen.
So not as easy as just delegating out the work that you don't want to do, doing the 80-20 rule, 80% on the business, 20% in the business. Not as easy as that.
The books make it sound like an easy 1, 2, 3 process, but boy, so far from the truth, it seems, at least for my business. And I'd be curious to know, I'm always searching for people that have seemingly cracked the nut in terms of finding that balance, or where the machine is running without them always being so present. But yeah, just when you think you have kind of a good system, then there's something that seems to test it and you're up to your elbows again.
It breaks. It constantly breaks.
Yeah.
That was my experience too. It's like you read all the business books, you jump in, and then you're 2 years in, and you're like, what the hell am I doing wrong, man? All these business books told me that it was going to be a lot easier, but they just all gloss over the day to day, and not a whole lot of these authors really kind of explore there's an emotional side to it as well. I mean, it is very difficult to be motivated day in, day out, every single minute of the day. And that's really what it requires to kind of get that dream of what a lot of these guys will tell you. I mean, my business, it started off where I started the CPA firm back in 2015, and it started off where all I was doing was writing content. I was writing content, doing a ton of podcasts, ton of speaking, and I loved that. That's like my favorite part of business, is being the face of the brand, the lead educator on the team. It's just very fulfilling for me. Well, you get like a year and a half in, and you're so good at that what happens? You get a ton of leads, a ton of business, and then you got to start figuring out how to make everything go and operate. And so you start hiring people and start trying to figure out how to manage people. And sure enough, 5 years later, now here we're at 2020, I've literally just gotten, like as of a week and a half ago, just gotten back to the point where now my primary role is back to that brand management, higher level strategy, and the educating, the content. So it's taken me 5 years to get back to the role that I wanted to do in the first place. So it's tough, man. It's so tough. And that's what people don't really talk about.
I think I've read a lot of these books, Traction, The E-Myth Revisited, and a lot of these books that what they're saying and the strategies they're laying out are I believe are sound. And I think the execution, the implementation of those strategies is the difficult part. And I think it's kind of what you guys are saying. And another thing to kind of point out there with these books is a lot of these times, these books aren't meant to be the solution. These books are meant to be the introduction to the solution so that you can go and then hire these people to help you implement that solution. And it's just something to, I see it all the time when I read these books. I'm like, yeah, it's really not that simple. And then you get to the end of the book and I go, by the way, if you need help with this, here's my business, here's my calling card. Go ahead and give me a call. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And I actually learned to just sort of try to find something from the book that you can take away with you. Because to your point, Tom, it's the books oversimplify. Even the great books tend to oversimplify. Like Traction, I loved Traction. But when I read it in 2015, I read it in 2016, when my business was on the first wave of kind of like blowing up, and I read the book and I was like, it's a pointless book. And I read it again middle of 2019 once I had 4 more years of experience, and I realized, oh, this is great. There's a lot of things in here that I can pull out and actually implement now. So I also think that there's just a timing aspect of it, but I just try to approach it from a lot of these books are going to oversimplify. They have to, because running a business every single day, being in the trenches for 10 hours every single day is really hard to document. And it's hard to talk about the emotional side, the motivational side, just like all the side conversations that you have, like all the little things that steer your culture and steer the direction of the firm. It's hard to document. So kind of like, I've been reading business books recently more of with an open mind, because I didn't read business books for a really long time as a result of all that. I gave up on them. I was like, they way oversimplified. Now I'm kind of back and just sort of reading, like, are there any sort of tidbits that I can take out and apply in my practice? And even if it's only one, then in my mind, it was a successful read.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree. Over time, I've read a lot of books, but if you just keep reading and consuming, it's so hard to implement. So trying to find one key takeaway that you can apply from one book, if it can benefit you. And I think, we're all wired individually and differently. So what works for one person in one book, even though the theory is good and it seems to make sense, being able to like physically and mentally apply it to your own situation is a whole nother deal, And I think, or you talked about just the grind. I'm curious, it seems like, at least it's been my experience, that especially building a business completely from scratch is you got to put in the time, and it is a grind, and you don't share all the late nights and the blood, sweat, and tears, but because you have a passion, if you have a passion for it and a big enough why, that's what kind of keeps you fueled and hopefully overcome those times where you're doubting.
That just made me realize I should interview my wife for this podcast because you're exactly right. She's the one that knows, I worked just insane, stupid hours, missed all sorts of events, family connections fell apart, friend connections fell apart. So here I am at the end of this. I've got 17 people on my team. We're running the multi-million-dollar CPA firm. Got friends going, wow, you're so successful. But it's like, well, yeah, but I gave up so much. And that's another thing the books don't talk about, which is also the point of the Staying Power podcast, right? We wanted to kind of dive into that type of stuff and show you, hey, it ain't all like glam. This is definitely a grind, and you got to be ready to work your weekends. Saturday, there are no days. There's no difference between a weekday and a weekend when you run a business. It is all one thing, and you just got to get used to that.
Before we dive into the why, I just want to say that there is a lot of sacrifices involved, even if you're just working for a business that's growing. Look, yesterday, true story, I showed up to my aunt's house for a barbecue. Everybody's like, oh, it's happy birthday. I'm like, whose birthday is it? And they're like, oh, it's your aunt's birthday. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, I had no idea. I was just like zoned in into like just all I think about. Okay, if it's not business, I don't care. Push it out of my way. And I showed up yesterday. It was just embarrassing. So just something to keep in mind. It's not all glitz and glamour when you're doing this type of stuff. But back to Mitch.
One last story on kind of that, or you talked about your wife and interviewing her. My wife just yesterday, we were talking about kind of where we're going now heading into the fall here. And she talked about probably my biggest gift is my ability to forget the pain where, in those heat of the battle moments where it seems like you're doing everything you can to keep it together and get a project done, or you're working the late nights. And as soon as I get over that crazy cycle, it's like my mind opens up and there's excitement and you accomplish something and it's onward and upward. But in reality, like there is a lot of sacrifice, from my wife and the kids or your extended family if you're not always able to be there, putting in the time on the business.
So Mitchell, what you just talked about is my experience as well, right? It gets very painful, very stressful. You get through it and then you automatically reset and you go, this is fun again. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Wondering, am I crazy? Because I keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. But I had a business coach that sent me an article from Inc. It's called 6 Things Entrepreneurs Wish Family, Friends, and Employees Understood. It was written by Kevin Daum. He's an Inc. 500 entrepreneur and best-selling author. And one of the things that he says is, this was number 6. For entrepreneurs, working means fun and relaxation. Contrary to popular belief, most entrepreneurs are not workaholics. While some people do like woodcrafting as a hobby or go play sports or dance, entrepreneurs' business is their hobby. So while you on the outside may be seeing they're pouring 80 hours a week and they're workaholics, the entrepreneur doesn't feel like that. This is just what they love to do. They love to build. They love to tinker. They love to try and fail. And even when they fail, it's our failure, right? Now I get to try again because I own it. I connected so much with this. I actually showed my wife and I was like, see, I'm not a workaholic. This is just, this is who I am. But yeah, it'd be really interesting, Tom. We should get Bonnie on here and interview her. What's it like living with Brandon?
Yeah, that you can just dive so deep in that area. But the whole work, if your work is your play and your play is your work, kind of one is the same. I think a lot of business owners would attest to that. Like, I used to love golf, for instance, when I was a kid. I hardly have an interest in playing because to play for 4 or 5 hours is too much time for me right now in my life. Like, I can play tennis for an hour and a half because I get exercise and there's kind of like a double benefit. But I would rather I get a lot of excitement and fulfillment from building something too,
Well, yeah, exactly. Like entrepreneurs love to build businesses. We thrive on the opportunity and the potential, right? And we want to figure out ways to get to that point. And I mean, in this article that I was referencing, he talks about, when I sit at a Yankees game, I amuse myself by calculating the per attendee revenue and cost of services to figure out how much money is being made at this game. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty much the same way. Even when I'm off, I can never turn my brain off. I'm always thinking about, what's the next advertising thing? I'll be watching ads on Hulu going, oh, that was a unique idea. And I wonder if I can take that and apply it to my business. It just doesn't stop. But it's also, to your point, a lot of fun. It's so much fun. And it does. The fun, the ability to be autonomous and to be able to call your own shots and to grow and scale something and see other people as well. Like, one of the most rewarding things for me is like hiring our employees and building them up and watching their wealth expand too. It's just so rewarding, and it allows you to get through the pain. It's kind of like having a child, right? I have almost a 1-year-old, and everybody tells me, oh, it's good that he's so cute and sweet right now, because when he's like a teenager, that's why they make him good and cute and sweet right now, so you can get through the teenage years. It's the same thing with entrepreneurship. It's a lot of fun. The opportunities, the excitement, the what-if scenarios, the figuring things out helps you get through that pain.
Yeah, I think, one additional point on that, this whole idea of work and play and the craziness that we sometimes go through and put our families through. I go back to, I mentioned Darren Hardy earlier in our conversation, but he talked about how a lot of people go into business and they set up their business plan and they squeeze their life in around it. But the way to do it is to first set up your life plan and really identify what you want in all the areas of your life, and then figure out a way to build your business around that. And I've tried to adopt that, and I'm certainly not going to say I've mastered it in any way, shape, or form. And the business at times is a pretty lopsided part of my overall wheel of life. But I think if you can sprinkle in and remain committed to the areas that are very important to you and your wife and where the vision of why are you putting in all this time, that helps fuel that kind of that next level of getting through those pain points.
Absolutely. I love that advice. And 2, it can change over time. Today, it could be, I'm going to scale and grow to this massive thing. And then in the future, it can be, I want to set really clear parameters because I don't want to work insane hours. I've set this all up so that I don't have to, and I want to spend a lot more family time. Like, I've talked about this with my wife, not like this specifically, but relatively similar. It's like, well, if you create these boundaries, I'm like, yeah, but if I create boundaries today while I'm in the boundary section of my day, I'm going to be sitting there thinking about all the growth I'm missing. So I've got to go out and
Sure.
achieve the growth just to tell myself that I could do it. And then I'll be able to transition out, which is like a very weird thing. It's an incredible thing for somebody else to commit to you, right? Like I look at my wife and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I'm the crazy one or
Yeah.
you're the crazy one.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
No,
I mean,
it takes an all-in commitment. Go ahead, Thomas.
no, I was gonna say I'm not even like in a business ownership position at this point, but you have to take care of yourself and you have to take care of the personal aspects of your life because I can't even commit to like a date on a certain day because I know I'm gonna be like slammed or something. It's like I think there needs to be some type of boundaries just to maintain your own personal sanity because if you don't and you go all in on the business, you're gonna let all these other areas of your life slip, and that's not always the right thing to do.
Hey, Mitch, back to you. I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about your big pain, right? So tell us about a time where you experienced some big pain that kind of made you question the entrepreneurship route and whether or not it was still worth it.
So I would chalk it up to probably the first 6 months of my business startup. So if you back up, that was from January through, call it June, into early July of 2019. And about 12 months prior to that, I had committed to an 18-month volunteer project where we were developing a 70-acre piece of land and planning for 6,500 attendees. It was a church event in July of 2019. So 6 months into the start of the new business, and there were 4 of us on the main planning committee. And I knew in taking that position, which started, call it about a year before the business startup, that it was going to create a lot of like growth for me and building a bigger team beyond just me, but also it was going to be a time commitment. And so it's been probably the biggest story of my life, and maybe other entrepreneurs attest to it, that my weakness can be overcommitting. And so when I started the new business, then starting a business from scratch, it takes an all-in Herculean effort. And there were a few weeks, and call it probably from the May to July timeframe, where I don't know how I physically made it through the week. Like I had to exhaust every productivity hack and eating healthy and all of those things, because there were a few almost sleepless nights, and I've never been stretched so thin in that final crunch to pulling off the event and then still getting the business up and running at the same time. I made it though. I'm still standing.
It's certainly a pretty big challenge. Like if you had to do it all over again, would you do something differently?
I would probably, hindsight's always 20/20, of course, but I should have heeded my wife's advice, and she had asked me when I committed to the volunteer project that how are you going to be able to squeeze both of them in and take care of your family? And I figured there would be ways, some miraculous way that, I'd find the right tool or read the right book in that process to all of a sudden have all kinds of time. But the reality is I was just literally overcommitted and had more on my plate than I could physically maintain and maintain like a normal, healthier pace of life. I signed up for a coach in July of 2019, then right after that event, saying, you know what, I need someone to help hold me accountable, create better accountability, and becoming more proactive versus reactive to everything that was happening in my life and business.
So how do you protect your time now? What are some things that you do to ensure that you don't become overcommitted again?
Well, one of the things is, again, scheduling in the playtime, the working, going back to that, having that life plan along with your business plan. So trying to schedule in time where we're going to go on vacation. Still haven't mastered that. But then even, scheduling time every day or not every day, but 4 or 5 days a week for exercise. I'll do it in the morning or in the middle of the day. Those kind of things. I've kind of identified a few different things: exercise, eating healthy, obviously having time with my family, but identifying a few key success hacks that fuel me and keep me lit up. those kind of help maintain my productivity, and I'm able to I feel like squeeze more in if I'm doing the things that bring me fulfillment outside of just work.
Oh, no, it definitely does make sense. It kind of brings you back to the balancing act, a little bit.
All right, that's great. And so you said you have a business coach. How has the business coach been helping you out?
I think the biggest thing, if I look back, I've worked with her now for, it's going on 13 months. I signed up for an initial 1-year commitment. I've had coaches on and off over the years in the past, and this is the first one where I've actually re-upped for a second go around after the initial contract. And the reason why is we just had a call actually earlier today. We have a call about every 10 days, but she said the reason that we're working together and the reason, or my goal is to help you grow. And so we're continually setting goals, and then she's providing accountability to help me reach my goals. But I would say, again, the biggest takeaway, the biggest advantage or the biggest switch over the last 12 to 13 months is, instead of reacting to everything, like putting out a fire in so many different areas of my life, is carving out thinking time for both the day and the week, and then more longer term, like where am I headed? Where are we taking this vision? And just being much more intentional about with my day and my time, so that way I can focus on the key areas that have the biggest impact.
So what has made this current business coach different from the others? And you kind of said helping grow, but what are some of the other aspects that make you feel really confident that this is the business coach for you?
I would say in the past, again, I've tried different coaches. I think they've all been via phone, where you basically have a phone conversation. But I feel like I've reached a point where if I'm making massive moves and improvement, I just reach a point where I kind of I participate in the phone call, but the advice that's being received doesn't really translate into action. Like I start tuning out the message, and the current coach that I've had has been really good at, they're trained to provide distinctions. And like, basically I have a pre-call coaching form where I highlight some of the wins and losses over the past 10, 12 days. And then we dive deeper into my main challenge for that week. And I just continue to be impressed, and I guess I'm making progress. When I have those challenges, we figured out a solution to overcome the challenge, or at least get me over that mental hurdle that I'm wrestling with at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And then you mentioned that you have time for thinking time. How do you schedule that time, and how do you protect it?
So that's something over the summer, I would say, we've been working on, or my coach has been hammering into me more and more. What I've found, again, working with this coach, is that there's certain things she'll start to plant the seed that I need to work on to make improvement. And I don't always implement it in day one, but sometimes that conversation will drip into several coaching calls. So now this summer, she's been talking about my need to prioritize and plan and protect my thinking time, because I was probably slipping a little bit into more of that reactive mode, and just dealing with all this information from COVID and the impact on the market and whatnot. I've found myself, like, for many years, I didn't really read the daily news, but I've gotten sucked into the news feed at times, and that can mess with your psyche and your motivation, and getting kind of the doom and gloom side of the market. But so back to your question of how am I protecting that time, I've had more of the aha moment and realization. I've carved out time in the last 10 days in particular. So again, this is kind of a new strategy but I know how important it is just scheduling time and making it a non-negotiable, that it absolutely must be done. It's as important as brushing my teeth, for instance. Like, it has to be done if I want to take where I'm at and bust through this. I feel like I've been at a bit of a plateau lately, so I need that thinking time to plow through it.
I completely understand it as well. Sometimes you just got to make things, like, you got to say it's a priority, mark it red, and it's an absolute must, like you said, like brushing your teeth. Otherwise, you'll just let everything else just run right over it. And it's just an unhealthy thing to do, to just let your work calendar just run everything. So definitely feel your pain there.
Yeah. And I think like the more that I think about it over the course of time, again, I don't have this mastered, and I'm not perfect in any way, but I've developed certain standards for myself that I absolutely must do. One of them is exercising for 4 or 5 days a week. Like if I don't do it, my mind starts going sideways and I start eating unhealthier, and it's just a quick snowball effect. And so it's like, and there's of course weeks where I don't get that 5 days in, but I make a solid commitment to myself to quickly get back to that. And the scheduling, the thinking time, and really being intentional about where am I going. And the thinking time is also like getting really selective and intentional about what am I doing with that time, and planning out your days and your weeks and your months to move the big rocks more quickly.
All that stuff keeps you grounded. I could attest to that. Like if you start getting off track, like when COVID shut down the gym, for me over here in New York, I started slipping. I had a really strict diet. Everything was going really, according to order. And next thing you know, because I wasn't going to the gym every day, that part was like a key core of my discipline, and everything else from my diet, just other aspects of my life started slipping as a result. So, I mean, some of those items, some of those non-negotiable items are actually key to keeping you grounded and keeping you moving in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think kind of just keeping that fuel, being able to keep the fuel lit. So that way I go back to those success indicators that allow you to keep thriving versus falling off track and getting that flat tire, kind of stopping you.
Well, Mitch, we're coming up here on time. It was a great episode today. We learned a lot and had a lot of great conversations. If our listeners wanted to learn about you and what you had going on, or otherwise get in contact with you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
There's a couple of ways. One is you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Mitchell Simonson is my profile name on LinkedIn. And my website, www.simonsonappraisals.com. And those would be probably the two best ways to connect with me. And if you want to talk further, we can, coordinate schedules from there.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. It's a wrap. We'll be releasing it shortly. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a review on iTunes and share the show with other business owners who may be facing their own growth challenges. And if you own a professional services firm, consider joining our private community. The Staying Power Collective is a community where owners of accounting, law, and consulting firms discuss best practices for running and growing virtual businesses. You'll get access to our Slack group, and you'll have a Zoom meeting once a month with a small group of other firm owners. To apply for the group, head on over to www.stayingpowercollective.com and fill out the brief form. And if you have suggestions for future topics or guests, or if you have general questions or feedback, send us an email at contact@stayingpowercollective.com. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great rest of your week.